Welcome back, everybody. Hi, Colleen.
Hi.
And today we're actually, I was thinking about it, Martha, before we started, and I was like, well, we see you all the time, but I think it's been a while since you've been on the podcast, other than with John, right?
Yes, it's been at least a year.
At least a year. Okay. Well, welcome back. We have Martha Lacy on with us again,
Thank you.
and we are glad you're here. Yeah, she was just recently on an episode that we released with where she was with, we were with John Holland, where he was reading Martha. So if you didn't take if you haven't listened to that one, you can do that. But yeah, it's been a little while and we are just happy to have you back.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. Martha is a friend and colleague. She's a retired physician, which is some of the things that we're going to be talking. I know it'll be weaved into what we're talking about today, Martha. Astrologer, Reiki Master Teacher, and an beautiful and excellent potter as well. It's like potterer. No, you're a potter as well. So we'll be getting into all of that. But one of the things that we are super excited to talk about today with Martha is or are self-care practices. Lord knows we need them right now with everything going on. So, and you have just a really beautiful story about what led you to really be talking about that subject right now, maybe an article in the works with it all. So we'll get into that as well as who knows where the conversation will lead us. All right. Well, why don't you go ahead and start just talking about a little bit about your story, and then you kind of were sharing before what led you to this specific topic as well, the self-care practice topic, but also I think you need to give just a little bit of your background before we go into that so people know how they relate.
Sure. Thanks. Uh, well, as you mentioned, I retired about a year ago. But prior to that, I spent 40 years in medicine. I trained as a hematologist, oncologist, and spent 33 years at Mayo Clinic in hematology, treating blood cancers. I specialized in one called multiple myeloma. I also specialized in bone marrow transplants. And after I retired earlier this year, I was approached by some nurses that work with the International Myeloma Foundation to do some patient support group sessions. And instead of talking about technical stuff, they asked me to talk about self-care practices for patients, because one of the issues with people who are facing a devastating diagnosis is that they they feel very out of control, and these self-care practices were intended to give them some stress relief and a sense of empowerment and agency. So I was happy to dip my toe back into the medical world. It felt a little strange not to be giving a technical talk. But one of the things that we did in the talk was do a little session of self Reiki. I did a guided self Reiki session for them at these sessions, just so they could get a sense of what Reiki feels like. And I was kind of overwhelmed a little at the end of the meeting. A number of them came up to me to tell me about, what experiences they had had. One gentleman, for instance, came up and said that he had been a paratrooper in the armed services and that he had landed wrong and he'd had back pain for 40 years that preceded his myeloma diagnosis. And he said during the guided self Reiki session was the only time that he felt some relief from that pain in 40 years. So I thought that was kind of a fun way to start on this. So after that, I started doing a number of other patient support group sessions, like giving the same talk. A number of them meet over Zoom these days, so I can easily give that talk to patients over Zoom. But as I was delving into that, it occurred to me that it's all that material was applicable for much more than just people with a health crisis. You know, we're all in chaotic times right now, and learning self-care practices is really important. And as I was giving the talk and developing it into an article, it really occurred to me how much Reiki itself can self-charge just standard self-care practices. Because I was trying to focus on things that anyone can do. Um, you know, I'm a big believer in yoga, but I didn't include it in my talk because you have to have a certain amount of strength and mobility to do yoga, and not everybody in these groups does. So I focused the talk on, in addition to Reiki, we talked about mindfulness and meditation and connection with nature and having a creative outlet. And as I've been developing it into an article, it's really impressed on me how much Reiki can supercharge each one of those practices.
So do you want to go into some details about it? And
Sure.
go ahead, even with the multiple myeloma, you know, if that is the group of people that you were speaking to, because I'm sure that it's relevant to some of our listeners too. And like you say, that it's for everybody, but
Yeah. And for those who are not familiar with that term or that condition, multiple myeloma is a bone marrow cancer. And it can cause low blood counts because it crowds out the normal bone marrow elements. But myeloma cells can also go to the bones and create little tumors that kind of erode the bones from the inside out. They call those lesions. So it can cause a lot of bone pain. It can cause fatigue, and it can be a pretty difficult illness to cope with. And when I first started at Mayo Clinic, the average survival of a person with multiple myeloma was about 26 months. It was really a devastating disease. And during the 30 plus years I was there, we saw a lot of advancements in treatment. And by the time I left, I had had patients that I had followed for more than 20 years. And we'd made a lot of progress with turning it from a really devastating, fatal disease into a chronic disease that can be managed. But despite all that, those advances, the one thing I noticed was that no matter where they were in their myeloma journey, most people still suffered with stress and anxiety, even if their treatments were working and they were in remission and they were doing well. It was just, I think, one of the most devastating aspects of having a really serious disease like that is what it does to your monkey mind and your anxiety levels. And one of the ways I framed it or one of the ways I began to understand it was thinking about it in terms of left and right brain function. Because, you know, I think some of the most anxious patients that I saw were people that read the most, did all their Google searches, knew the most about it. And so then it occurred to them to worry about things that they might not have thought to worry about. And so it occurred to me that the left brain, for all its greatness in terms of advancing research and technology and treatments, the left brain plays a big role in stress and anxiety because it allows us to overanalyze and think and worry and fear, and that leads to stress. And so my little checklist of self-care activities really were aimed at, you know, the common thread I found was that all of the activities I identified that they could work on um, really enhanced right brain function, because I think the right brain is the symbolic part of us, the part of us that is out of the day-to-day moments. It's out of time and out of space in many ways, and it's symbolic, and it allows us to receive, and it turns off that over-analysis. And I think a lot of being able to manage stress has to do with allowing the right brain to have its seat at the table, because you don't want to always be in your right brain. You need to actually be able to drive a car and accomplish tasks. but but I think by overemphasizing the left brain, we've allowed the right brain to not have its proper seat at the table. And I think in order to achieve wholeness and healthiness, we need to allow both those sides of our brain to fully function.
So can you give examples of what that actually means? Because I know a lot of people hear left brain, right brain, but when particularly a person who is very analytical, logical, struggles with the idea of how to activate the right brain and even why.
Well, I think why is really because the right brain allows us to get beyond the here and the now. It thinks symbolically, it thinks artistically, it's I think more connected with our higher spiritual sources. And so when you allow it a seat at the table, it just allows you to be more whole, more healthy, it allows you to function on more than just an analytical level. And so, and I gave people a list of different things they could do, because not everybody wants to do every single thing on that list. And some tasks will resonate more than others. So I started with mindfulness, just because I think mindfulness is just a way to get ourselves out of worrying about the past and worrying about the future, and just being in the moment. And if you think about it, Reiki can really enhance that. I mean, when you're either giving or receiving Reiki, you become very much in tuned to the small nuances, the way the person in front of you is breathing, their energy fields, you become in tune with their emotions. You become almost entrained to them. And so Reiki, just in and of itself, I think, can enhance mindfulness.
And can you explain to Martha what you mean by mindfulness, and maybe even some of the things that you're, telling the support group of what to do to increase their mindfulness or to go into a mindfulness practice?
Well, mindfulness is really the ability to just savor the moment, to just be in the present. Because if you think about it, it's a very left brain thing to do, to worry about what happened last week or what's going to happen next month. and and mindfulness is just that ability to just be in the moment, savor the day, you know, set down the remote, turn off the TV, take the headphones out. And, if you're eating a meal, just focus on that meal, enjoy the meal. If you if you go outside, just you savor the sunshine hitting your face. It's just a way to be in the here and the now, because ultimately all any of us have is this very moment. We don't have yesterday or tomorrow. We have this moment. And so mindfulness is just a way to allow ourselves to be fully present.
It reminds me of something my son said to my grandson the other day. My grandson popped up and said, "Today I am as old as I have ever been." And then Nick said, "And you're as young as you will be." It's like, oh yeah, right there we are, right in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we lose some of that as kids. I think as kids we're more in the moment. Um, and then I wondered that here's something I'm always curious about to get your take on it. because I feel like when I am listening out to the future, I can still be in the moment doing that because I'm paying attention to that's what I'm doing in that moment.
Yeah. Um, well, and when you're listening out into the future, you're actually, I get the sense, I don't want to put words in your mouth, that you're doing it precisely to enhance the moment. So that um, so that you can gain the skills and abilities and mindsets that will lead to that future that you're reaching out to.
I would say that's true. Yeah, we were talking the other day about the what ifs, and I thought, oh, I probably really, I don't know, I rarely have what ifs. And I know that that is, something, of course, fortunate to be in a position to not have the what ifs, um, is probably as much true of anything, especially in this context of if somebody has a chronic illness with a disease like multiple myeloma. I hope I'm saying that
Mm-hmm.
properly. That would be a big difference. So training your mind would be a whole piece of it. And then the how to.
And mindfulness, I think, is just a habit that you can develop. And it's a state of being. And then meditation is one of the techniques you can use to cultivate that. And so meditation was the second thing that I went over with them. And one of the things I tried to dispel was some people say, oh, I can't do meditation because they think they have to sit for 30 or 60 minutes and they can't sit still that long. And I think one of the misconceptions of meditation is that it has to be a certain amount of time. And one of the things I emphasized was that meditation is a technique that allows you to achieve mindfulness. And it can do so by having you focus on your breath or a mantra, or um, if you use Reiki before you meditate, it can really help quiet that monkey mind. Um, and that you can do it just for even short periods of time during the day, 2 to 5 minutes a day. And but if you do that consistently, the effects are cumulative, and it allows you to not be at the mercy of your mind, but instead allows your mind to serve you as you learn to master it. And
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things that I like about, kind of your take on the self-care is that it's not something. I think everybody thinks that self-care has to be like a spa day, you know? And especially if you're going through, something like multiple myeloma, let alone even just as a busy parent, um, well, we would all love that. It doesn't have to be that. So I like that, you have these practical moments of mindfulness and meditation, that it can be short. Also to know that it's a muscle and you can build it up over time, you get better at it. I know for mindfulness, I had a hard time kind of grasping what that meant until I think I just started. One of the techniques that I know was always helpful for me, especially who you've talked about left brain. I talk about this a lot, being left brain, being clair um intellect or clair cognizant. It's a dual, aspect where yes, the analytical is amazing for a lot of things, but that also has the overthinking as a part of it. Um and one of the things that I found along the way somewhere, and that is helpful. And you probably might know this better than me because I forget, but it's like 5 things that you see, 4 things that you hear, 3 things that you can smell, and you go through like your senses essentially. And I'll do that on walks, especially if I'm in that kind of overthinking. What I find is really interesting about it is also having been in that journey of the clair senses. One of the clairs that I don't connect to too easily in the right side of my brain when I'm on a walk, that brings me into that groundedness the most, or that kind of present moment the most, is the clairaudience. So if I can hear the birds, even if I can hear lawnmower, or, a house having a project done on it in the neighborhood or something like that, it brings me into that presence. Out of anything that brings me into that is the clairaudience aspect. So just listening, and it's not necessarily a clair, but just listening, and the birds, and that's really what brings it in. Or at night, the crickets, things like that. But really, just even those quick practices really can bring you into that present moment, even if you are in a time frame of stress. Even if it's like, but I really do have a lot going on, or a lot to think about. It's like, oh, I can just push that off for even just this 10-minute walk or 5-minute walk. Or like you said, if that's not possible, if you are really in that fatigue, or that, you know, part of you that is in that physical where limitations, part of your journey where you're in that physical limitations, like even just in where you're sitting in the moment, things like that bring you into that mindfulness.
Yeah. For me, it's often smell.
Oh, interesting.
Because one of the things I love about living where we live is, um, I, first thing I notice when I open the door is that sort of vanilla butterscotchy smell of the ponderosa that you, um, and first thing in the morning, it's really strong.
I'm like, ooh, what does that smell like? I haven't smelled that smell. I like it.
And the pine trees around. We live in an area with lots of pinyon and juniper and ponderosa, and the ponderosa is what really overwhelms me. But I just love that, especially right after a rain. That smell of the pine trees around us.
Yeah, we have the same thing here with the big fir trees. Even now, noticing the fall colors, really beautiful fall colors coming in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
here too. We've got red scrub. The scrub oak are turning bright red, and the aspens are all at their peak right now.
Mm. Yeah. Makes me just even imagine it, take me into that moment. I think it's always interesting for me with mindfulness because I pay so much attention to my mind management. Because of it, my mind will, like so many, just run away with me. And so I think about how to manage my mind and how to use Reiki to manage my mind all the time. And I think one of the things I'd like to ask you about, because in my perception of how meditation works for me, is it really doesn't ever completely stop thinking. And I thought that I was supposed to stop thinking, like have no thought. And, that lasts maybe a second. And then I'm thinking about having no thought. And then I'm thinking about having no thought. And then it goes from there. And so what have learned is to just let the thoughts come in, let them go out. And what I find with Reiki is if I need it to, it'll actually kind of put them into order for me so that it ends up with some kind of just a relevance to the meditation, or, like, oh, that's what I've been thinking about, oh, that's what's going on. Just having an understanding of brings me to some clarity. So is that your thought around meditation too, or is it just unique for each person?
Well, I definitely think Reiki enhances the ability to get into that meditative state. And I agree with you. I think Reiki does allow you to see your thoughts in a new light. And it's almost like you can just watch them drift by.
Yeah.
And Reiki allows you to sort of be in connection with that larger part of you that's bigger than your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, and I always ask for kind of to have both an idea kind of a mind and a solution oriented mind. So I think that, and um, because I'm so right brained, I also really am often asking for the practicalities of all of the mind stuff that goes on. I only talk about it like that because it took me so long to just be comfortable with how it worked for me, thinking I was supposed to do it some other way. Like if I'm being mindful, it looks like what I like I had expectations around what that would mean for me.
Yeah, and I had some of the same expectations that you read, oh, you have to get to the point where you're no thoughts, and I never could get to no thoughts, which is why I loved journeying so much.
Right? Yeah, because
Well,
it gives you something to do. Yeah.
active, yeah. The thing is about meditation too is that I it's pretty hard or it's not hard, but like a lot of people are going to be different about how they can get to the no thought, but it's being settled in your body while the thoughts are happening, like they're passing by like clouds in the sky. There's not an attachment to the thought, even if it comes into the worry. There are different styles of meditation where, it the techniques are different as well, and different schools of thoughts of meditation, no pun intended, as well. But then some people do get to the place where, again, it's a muscle. Some people do get to the place where they have no thought for a period of time, and then that can get longer. And then other people who are experienced at meditation, it really is just a non-attachment to the thoughts that kind of come and go, as well, especially if there's distractions that happen while you're meditating, right? So you see that video. I don't know if you all saw that video of the monk who was meditating and the kittens are coming up and playing on him. There's like 5 kittens, and he's in the middle of meditation, and they are coming up and they're jumping on him and like playing with his robe and playing with each other, and he's just sitting there. And I would imagine, I mean, well, I shouldn't say I would imagine, but I would think too that like at the same time internally you would be like not you'd kind of be in joy around that, but still be in the stillness and just like almost even absorbing the playfulness of the kittens, and yet he still was in his meditative state and not being fully distracted by the kittens that are playing. If you haven't seen that video, it's so adorable.
Look
With
for
it. What?
I'll look for that one.
Yeah, it's really cute. I mean, and also like what a study in meditation with it, because like who can sit there through multiple kittens playing on you while you're trying to meditate? It's so cute.
I'd have to touch them.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Most people would. So yeah, it was pretty cute. And I don't think it didn't come across in the video of like, he's like trying to, not like be in his, like trying to go through any sort of expectations around of it. He looked zen and calm, and that it was just like, this is what's happening right now.
That's great.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll look for that the next time I give this talk to a group.
Oh yeah, there you go. Because I know for me, like when I've done meditations, I'm able to get to it in places that I have like almost like an outside resource that helps. So in the sauna, I know some people like experience it in the float tank and things like that with meditation. When you are able to touch that place of no thought, I mean, I'm the same as you, Colleen. I cannot hold it, or Martha, I cannot hold it for very long. But man, it is a lovely place to be. And I
Mhm.
don't want to be there all the time because, like you said, you've got your left brains and your practicalities. But the level of peace that I feel in my body when I'm able to get there is really, really another level. And I like to journey. That's my preferred style of like spiritual work because of all the things that journeys provide for us. But I also love meditation practice, and I can imagine, when you're in those places of like with your in the support group, what might have used to been your patients, that getting to any moment of peace in your body, any moment of peace in your mind is kind of irreplaceable. That
Yeah.
it's like that is like, oh gosh, just for a moment, if I can get here, that is really so it's really kind of also in its own way a miracle.
And it's such a great thing to be able to develop it and have it as a tool that you can reach for when you need it. One of the times I suggested they use it is when they're in the waiting room,
Yeah.
waiting to get their blood draw or their doctor appointment or waiting to get their results. Those are all very stressful, anxious times. And if you just have this tool you can reach for you're so that you're in control of how to manage that stress instead of feeling like you're at the mercy of it.
Yeah. I also like, Colleen, though, how you talk about your own way and having to let go of the expectations, especially being somebody who's ADD, like to try to make yourself different than what it should be. And we're very different in that way. Like, we've talked about this on the podcast, how we have different Ayurvedic like profiles, that we're different in those kinds of ways as well. And what self-care means to each of us, right? Because it is going to be different. Like I search for that feeling. It is going to be different for you that has like, a different need within your body, within your mind, outside of expectations of what it should be. And I think that's helpful for people, especially when we have all different, life scenarios, personalities, ways of being, neurodivergence, things like that, that can be trying to make somebody, be in the way that it should be. Let's even say like neurotypical, you you can't, but that's also part of your superpower, and so I love that we all kind of share our different versions of it, because I think that that's an important piece too.
Yeah. The third practice that I suggested they try is just connecting with nature. And, not everybody's fortunate enough to live out in the woods and be able to um, connect with it the way I can. But you don't have to be out in the woods to connect with nature. You can, open your front door and go out and talk to a tree or go to a park or garden or even just gaze out the window, or even just start paying attention to the phases of the moon. And all of those things allow you to just feel connected to something larger than yourself. And the Japanese have a term called shinruku, which is forest bathing, and they go out and they've actually studied it and shown that it helps with stress, improve stress hormones and all kinds of other beneficial physical effects. But there's just something amazing about just being able to look at a tree and start connecting with it on a heart to heart level. And I suggested to the group that they drop out of their headspace and connect into their heart space and talk to the trees. And I told them you might feel silly at first and feel contrived, but that eventually, if you keep doing it, you'll get to a place where you actually feel the connection with the tree and feel like, and that possibly get to a point where the trees will start tapping you on the shoulder.
I don't know what that's like.
And
Yeah.
Reiki can really enhance that, because Reiki can really, if you make a point to connect in and call in Reiki, and then try to connect with a tree. Well, you guys know it. That's that can really supercharge that connection with nature and really get you to a place where you can feel balanced and part of a larger fabric of life.
Well, I think a lot of times too, to even simplify it is just to notice beauty in all of its forms. Like just as even in a flash of a moment, like, oh, I look out here because it's looking out at nature in my backyard. Like just 4 arborvitae bushes. So, but I always look at them and it's like, oh, and the birds and things going there. Having lived on 30 acres for 20 years and really out, now I know how far out in the country we were all those years, and now being in a neighborhood. And I find it in the neighborhood just as much as, wherever. And I was thinking about the term forest bathing. So, and I've always pictured that because we have forest here. So it's easy to think about doing forest bathing. What about people who don't have forests? Are you saying it's like just even connecting, like spending a moment with a tree?
Mm-hmm. Or having a house plant, or I think there's just a connection that you can make, and some of it is at a heart level or right brain level, but also they secrete pheromones and all kinds of things that help us, help our immune system, and help our stress levels, and help us function better.
Well, and the expanded reality, we call it extraordinary reality. We've been talking a lot about it in our distance Reiki share, and actually, want to get to the point where we can even teach longer sections of how to expand into extraordinary reality with Reiki, just simply by, for me, I use the distance symbol and I'll bring it in. It's the divine heart and my heart line. I'll imagine my heart light shining in front of me and behind me and on each side, above, below, and within, and then go to the tree and then make that heart connection, because I think of the distance symbol is that heart to heart. So it's beyond the time and space, going into the commonality of the tree and me at the core of, the physical existence of it. And so, and then using the mental emotional symbol for communication and translation, because I don't speak tree and the tree doesn't necessarily speak English.
Yeah, that's
They'll,
beautiful.
yeah, they'll show up. I love it right now. I'm really dialed into that right now. And just everywhere I go, the trees are like, hi. It's actually a really fun state of mind.
And I do that with the birds around here too, especially the ravens.
I always say hi to them. I know they fly to where, I mean, whether it's true or not, I think it's true. I think they notice me. They'll be up high, and as I'm going by on my walk, I'll always say hi to them. I feel like they fly to different spots, so I do that.
I'm sure they do.
I'm sure they do, because there's a couple generations of them that live here.
They're like, do you have any food for us today?
I tried to feed them.
I know. I know. I'm kidding.
I think about feeding them, but then I don't want to attract bears and raccoons to our place. So
That makes
Good call.
sense. No bears. Well, I also think that these practices like help, they kind of also guide you, even if you guide you to the next, what you need to do next for your own practices, like another more levels of self-care, what you need in the moment. Sometimes you do have the time, or you're in a cycle where you can go to a spa day, or you can spend a long time in your self-care practices. Other times, like you said, it's short. Sometimes it's a cup of tea. Sometimes it's just a breath out in the sunshine, all of these different short things. But I also think that once you kind of start in the practice, the energy guides you, or even if it's not Reiki, your practices guide you to, what you need next. And as an example of that, it's funny because I was just thinking about this today, not realizing this is honestly what we were talking about, Martha. I just kind of missed the conversation about what we were talking about today. So it's always how it should be, as far as like why it brought up these thoughts. Is recently I had a client say in a session that she sets her alarm 10 minutes early for when she has to get up, so that she can snooze and give herself self Reiki very first thing in the morning for 10 minutes. And then she gets up for her alarm. So it's like 10 minutes early. And at the time, I was like, "Oh, that's a great idea." But that was kind of like where it left. And then recently, I was had this thought of like, okay, Reiki, I really would like more just energy in the mornings. Like I want to wake up with more energy. And so then somewhere along the line, that idea of hers of setting the alarm 10 minutes early, spending 10 minutes in self Reiki, and then getting up but I didn't connect the two. I didn't connect that thought of like, I want to wake up with more energy. Also, it's a little counterintuitive that 10 minutes before your alarm would be helpful. I didn't connect that that would maybe be like the answer to my prayer, to say, long story short with it, that would be the answer. So I started doing that. And then as I was doing that, it's like, okay, well, what I can do during that 10 minutes is also be kind of in that, you know, what is that when you're in between? What state is that? Is that the theta state when you're in between sleep and awake? I know your brain is in a certain brainwave state
Yeah,
when you're,
state is kind of a visionary state.
yeah. And then when I was in that, I was like, oh, okay, now I can bring in my gratitude practice. And it wasn't anything like a should, it's just all kind of just guiding me to do this. And it was all this morning during this time frame that I connected all of these things, and like that, oh, there was that guidance all the way through. And that's a self-care practice to me. Like that's what I'm like, was even had the thought of like, oh, this is a self-care practice, and that guidance all the way through. And I haven't had it have me wake up with a whole lot more energy yet. But I've been so cognizant of the fact that this was the answer to that intention. This was the answer. And then even going all the way back to months ago when my client told me that, and it kind of just like, I didn't even really consciously remember, but it was like all of these little pieces falling into place. And then now having this podcast and having those thoughts and that connection this morning, I was like, oh, wow, look at all of that orchestration of all of this, that it does guide you. And I might not have, years and years ago, I might not have put all of those pieces together, when you're kind of first starting out in these things, and might not have put all of those things together. But now I can see that it's like all of this guidance over time that is really, and I know like doing 10 minutes of self Reiki first thing in the morning is not unique to me. Like that's a very common practice among Reiki practitioners and things like that, or it might be meditation or something like that. But it is that higher guidance that was orchestrating all of these things. And I'm like, okay, I'm waiting for the extra energy here, but I do have faith and trust that it will come if I just kind of continue this. And there's days in there that I miss. And I've also really noticed that actually when I do miss the days, I miss it. Like, oh, this is a really lovely practice. It has changed the way a little bit that I wake up, at least my frame of mind. starting off with Reiki and gratitude. I mean, really, and as far as energy is concerned, that would have not been what I would have first gone to. I would have thought, okay, like, what do I need to either add or subtract to diet? Like, all of these different things that it could have been, that wouldn't have been the first thing that I would have gone to.
And what a beautiful illustration that is, Robin, of the right and left brain functions. Because I think that intuitive guidance is all right brain function, but your ability to recognize it for what it was your left brain, then using that framework.
Interesting. That's interesting because I am Claire, like, cognizant intellect. So that's interesting to like that marrying of those two. Huh. More pieces to the puzzles coming in.
And
But
then
that does happen. That is a part of how this all works too, is that it's like this just, we only think of these times of when we are in our exact practices, but you can see all of the different puzzle pieces that came in outside of when I'm in like a meditation or when I'm in a journey or when I'm in, all of that guidance was kind of outside. I mean, none of it's outside of our practice, but it was outside of that like exact time frame that you think of when that only that guidance comes in. It's about like that receiving of the guidance in all sorts of ways, which is our intuition, which is, like you said, Martha, right brain. And I happen to use Reiki for that, but that can happen in meditation. It can happen in mindfulness. It can happen in all of these other practices too. You don't necessarily just need to be in Reiki for that to happen.
right. And that's part of why these things are so powerful. If you even do them for a small amount of time each day, the benefits are cumulative because it does spill over into all the rest of the parts of your life. And the other practice that we talked about in the support groups was the importance of just developing a creative outlet. And for me, that's the pottery and painting. But it doesn't have to be an artistic outlet. It can be music, which I guess is a different form of art. It can be gardening. It can be cooking. There's all kinds of ways to just let yourself be creative. And I think the whole state that you're trying to, it's following a passion that allows you to find flow. And it's that state of flow that is just so liberating and so in the moment, and such a right brain function and such a self-care moment.
Following a passion that creates flow.
Yep.
I like that. That's a good quote.
I think Carolyn Meese used to say, if you have a passion, it has a purpose.
That's good. I like too how you describe it, Martha, because being able to describe it as right and left brain is, maybe how a multitude of people can understand that, or be accepting or, interested in that guidance with it. Because when you said there's that right brain and that left brain for the example that I used, I was like, oh yeah, look at that, being able to describe that in a way that people may not be resistant to, that are, maybe not into Reiki for a variety of different reasons, or spiritual ideas for a variety of different reasons.
Well, and right brain can sound so amorphous, but when you actually get examples out of your life of, oh, that's your right brain kicking in, allowing you to do this or that, then it helps create a framework for people to understand why it's important to develop that right brain.
Yeah. Well, and creative outlets show up in so many different ways, and yeah, I of course love crocheting and knitting is one of my preferred ways, but I went through a pretty big phase of just even coloring and coloring books to make that easy of, because sometimes I think what happens for me when I've been in either, levels of fatigue, or I have had some periods in my life where I've had year-long illnesses to deal with, or chronic fatigue to deal with. And sometimes the trying to do that one more thing is like, oh, it's just one more thing I have to focus on, to say, okay, now I have to be able to do this stuff, or take the time for this when I feel like I don't know how to take more time or to spend more time. And so things I think like you're explaining are really pretty easy to do. They're
Mhm.
something that we can do. And I have to admit, I think one of the things for me that gets in the way is I constantly have to manage the shoulds. So the shoulds for me are a big, like, kind of navigating through my brain focus of, rather than like the what ifs, I have the shoulds, so I'm always having to try to, you know, really like set aside those shoulds and observe them for what's true about them. Like, what is this actually a should? Is this an expectation? And then, of course, Reiki helps to let that go. Um, but I think also the idea of all of the how-tos to do it, when it feels like one more thing to do, for me is really observing the shoulds around it. Like that I'm supposed to do it a certain way, or it's supposed to look a certain way. Um, and all of these things that you've mentioned are definitely things that people can do their way.
Yeah. And it's keeping in mind that it's the process, not the product, that's important.
There you go. Say that again. I think expand on that, because I think that is, out of all of it, that's where my shoulds lead me.
Right. It's not that you have to go out and, sit down and paint a masterpiece or write a novel. It's just that act of doing something creative gets you into that sense of flow where you lose your track, all sense of time and space. And so it's really the process that's the important part, and not whatever product you wind up with at the end of it. If it turns out you do paint a masterpiece, great. but but that wasn't the point to begin with. It was the process of doing it, and just the creativity and the fun and the flow and the joy you get of just you know feeling like you're taking part in beauty. And
And creating something. Yeah. Yeah, that's such a good point. The outcome expectation, or the intention of doing it for an outcome, I think is actually probably one of the things that can get in the way.
that ought to be a side benefit, not the goal.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, exactly. Well, explain a little bit more about the flow too, so people understand what you mean by that.
Well, for instance, when I go down to my pottery studio, I lose all sense of time. I think I'm down there for 10 or 15 minutes, and all of a sudden I realize it's dinner time. And um, it's and that's such a great feeling to realize that I spent an entire afternoon without once looking at my watch, and and I'm just enjoying the heck out of what I'm doing. And that's what I think of as flow. And
So go ahead and explain how you got started with Reiki, shamanism, and all of that as a physician, and how that's all applying to these skills, and like your self-care now. Because that was a big deal to retire from a 40-year career, and a very intensive career. And you seem to be really thriving with it.
Yeah, well, it feels like, well, when I started with Reiki and shamanism, it started many years ago, probably after the death of my mother. Everyone goes through kind of an existential uh, thing, and I felt like I was um, searching spiritually. And I tried a number of different things for a few years, and then I discovered shamanism. And I discovered it largely because of a patient on the bone marrow transplant unit. We got into a conversation about meditation, and he started telling me about journeying. And I'd never heard of it before. I was fascinated, and he told me that it there's a place where the transplant patients can stay while they're outpatients called the Gift of Life Transplant House. And he was finding power animals for all the other patients who were staying in the Gift of Life house. And I had never heard of it. And he brought the next day he came in and handed me Michael Harner's book on the Way of the Shaman. And I went home and I read it cover to cover, and got online and found um, their basic foundation for shamanic studies workshops, and I was signed up for shamanism workshops by a few weeks later. And then I started going to these workshops and journeying on a regular basis and feeling like I was leading this secret double life, because I couldn't possibly talk to anyone at work about what I was doing at these weekend workshops, much less bring a drum and a rattle into the Mayo Clinic. And I kept meeting people and making friends all around the country, and they kept telling me, "Oh, you should add Reiki to your repertoire because it really meshes well with the shamanism, and it'll really supercharge everything you're doing." And so finally, I signed up for the Reiki workshops, and that's when I met you.
Right.
And actually, I had signed up, and the workshop where I met you was full, because Colleen was co-teaching it with Jill, who was getting her LRMT certification. And um, and I was really disappointed because I had found Jan's podcast and I had heard you on a podcast, and I knew you were into both shamanism and Reiki, and I was like, oh, wish I could do it when she was there. And then there was a cancellation, and Jill emailed me and said I could do that group. So I managed to do all my Reiki training with Colleen. and and then I got so into it, I began teaching Reiki to the palliative medicine nurses at work. And so they developed a whole Reiki program in their palliative medicine program. And we did a Reiki study with myeloma patients. We intended to do in-person Reiki, and we had the study all written and ready to open in the spring of 2020 when COVID hit. And then we couldn't do in-person Reiki at that point. So we amended the study and did a study doing Reiki distance sessions weekly for 4 weeks. And we had 3 different groups. One got the real thing, one got pretend distance Reiki sessions, and one group got no intervention at all. And we did a number of quality of life studies that sort of standard verified tools to measure quality of life. And our quality of life studies really showed that the patients that got the real Reiki had reductions in pain and stress levels and anxiety. And so that was fun to do, both because it allowed me to like come out of the closet at work and it I always think of Reiki as the gateway woo woo, because people can understand when you explain Reiki.
That's a really funny term. Gateway woo woo.
But it was also a nice way to introduce patients to it. and the patients that got it really loved it. And it also is a way to actually show that distance Reiki is a real thing. It's not just some magical made up thing that we talk about.
So are those studies on the Mayo Clinic website?
We have written the initial manuscript and it got sent back for revisions. So it's somewhere in the process of being revised, and we're going to submit it again for publication.
Wow, great. Well, definitely let us know and we'll announce when it's out there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it'll be fun when it gets published. These things.
Well, I think the quality of life is one of the things that we can see more easily than some of the big studies because the big studies are, of course, underfunded. So it's challenging to actually get them funded and get them done in those ways. But we see the quality of life. I know working when I was volunteering in the oncology clinics here, and working with people, definitely the quality of life was, shining through all of it. Even when people had no idea what Reiki was, we would just give them Reiki while they were receiving chemotherapy, and definitely saw a reduction in pain and stress pretty significantly, even in 20 minutes. So then compiling all of those results, I again would say it's not going to qualify as a formal study because it doesn't have all of the qualifiers with the sham Reiki and no Reiki and some Reiki. But for the people that we did Reiki with, I would say every time, like they could be there with a pain level of 8 and a stress level of 10. And by the time we finished with 20 minutes, both numbers would be down to 2 or 3. And then even sometimes when people would say, "Oh, I slept so well for the first time."
Mm-hmm.
And you think of that as like not significant, but it's so significant when you're the one who hasn't slept in a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can just see them visibly relaxing during the Reiki session.
Yeah.
Whether it's in person or even over Zoom, I could see it.
Yeah. Yeah, the big difference. How fascinating that that ended up as a distance Reiki, because I think that's the other thing we found with the pandemic is just really, truly how powerful distance Reiki is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it like works the same.
I had got on session with one kind of big burly farmer type from Iowa, and he told me he only signed up for the study because his wife insisted, and you could tell he was really very skeptical. And when we got started, I said, "Well, you could either lay down or sit in a comfortable chair," and he's like, "I'm fine in this chair." And then we did our session and he looked like he was really getting into it. And when we were done with the distance Reiki session, he was visibly altered and took a few moments to come sort of back into the present moment. And um, he said, "Next week, I think I'll lie down."
Reiki. Next week, I think I'll lie down.
Oh, good. Oh, it reminds me of working on my childhood best friend's father, and same thing, really gruff guy, and and he had neuropathy, and his feet were really swollen, and I was giving him Reiki, and he's like, "All right, you can do it." And so I just sat on the floor, giving his feet Reiki, trying to help out. Somebody knocked on the door, and he's like, "Get off." And then the guy leaves and he goes, "Okay, start again." Oh gosh, some of the best stories with those things. And the unexpected experiences that people have. So fun to watch. Well, now tell us about astrology and how you got into astrology, because for anybody listening, she's an outstanding astrologer. And so how you got into that, and then if you don't mind, spend a little bit of time with the planets and where we're at right now. Because I don't know about you, but that Saturn moving back into Pisces was such a big bump. And then we have the next one with Uranus going back into Taurus. I'm like, okay, hang on.
For me, I got interested in astrology because, I just like reading woo-woo books, and I ran across a book called Cosmos and Psyche. And it was written by a guy named Rick Tarnas, who is a history professor, and he wrote one of the most commonly used history books on history of Western civilization books that colleges use. And then he came out with this other one. He came out with that one in the early 90s. And in 2006, he came out with Cosmos and Psyche, which the first 70 pages reads like a history book. And then he starts correlating all the different historical periods with the outer planet cycles. And I was just fascinated because I'd never heard of that before. Now that's a branch of astrology called mundane astrology. But at the time I was reading this, I had never heard of it. And so I started listening to astrology podcasts, and this is probably around, I don't know, 2018, 2019 or something. And then in 2019, all of the podcasts kept saying 2020 was going to be a big deal. Big things were going to happen. And then when everything they said was going to happen happened, I was like, oh, holy shit, there's something to this. Sorry, I don't suppose we're supposed to curse on the podcast, but
You're all right.
Yeah.
I think all of us had a lot of holy shit around the 2020.
So then I got interested in studying it and studied it a lot on my own, and then eventually enrolled in Kepler College to study it more formally. And for me, it makes sense in terms of, the shamanism, the Reiki, all of it really is describing how we're connected energetically. And for me, astrology is just a natural extension of that. It gives you a bit of a map to understand how the energy currents are flowing. And so I've had a fun time delving into it, in part because my whole chart is like Virgo and Pisces. And so I think of my whole chart describes this left brain, right brain thing phenomena. And astrology for me is both. It's very intuitive and symbolic, and yet there's a lot of methodology to it, and so it appeals to me. um, but if you're feeling big shifts, it's no surprise, because we're in kind of a big deal time astrologically. All of the outer planets between last will have changed signs in roughly a 15 to 18-month period. So starting last fall, when Pluto shifted from it had been sort of back and forth between Capricorn and Aquarius for the last 2 years, but it shifted into Aquarius, where it'll be for the next 40 years. And then Saturn and Neptune have been in Pisces, and they shifted into Aries earlier in the spring, but now they're retrograding back for a few months into Pisces. And Neptune typically, Pluto spends anywhere from 20 to 40 years in a sign. Its rotation is elliptical, so it doesn't spend the same number of years in each sign. And Neptune spends about 14 years in a sign, and Saturn spends about 2 to 3 years in a sign. And Uranus is about 8 years in a sign. So And then Uranus shifted into Gemini early in the summer, and it's about to shift back into Taurus for another few months, and then it'll be in Gemini again for the next 8 years, starting early next year. So within about an 18-month period of time, we had all of the outer planets shifting, and they had all been in earth and water signs, and now they're all shifting into fire and air signs. So it's a big shift culturally from sort of more feminine receptive vibes into more active, energetic earth, fire and air signs. And we'll be having an exact conjunction of Saturn and Neptune in February. And they'll be conjoining at 0 Aries, which astrologically 0 Aries is like a magical point, because that's, 0 Aries is considered the start of a whole new cycle. And so I think it's a time for us to, if it's feeling like there's a lot of shifts happening, you're not imagining it. And I think as a culture, it'll be interesting to see where this takes us. The last 14 years of Neptune in Pisces, I think, had a huge shift, because if you think about it, back in 2011, very few people were talking about shamanism or Reiki or astrology. And then within that 14-year time frame, it became very commonplace for people to be talking about those disciplines and other spiritual things. Even yoga was not all that mainstream back before the shift of Neptune into Pisces. But I think as it shifts into Aries, will be interesting to see where it takes us.
That's an understatement. Like, where is this going? Yeah, it's such a fascinating time, and again, utilizing Reiki to manage it and mind management. I find that I have to definitely focus on all of the things you said for self-care to get that mind management skill. I or practice, maybe that's a better word for it, is to really step one is to notice, like, where is my mind? And then step two are the different tools that I personally use, like Reiki energy, to help me get to be where I want my mind to be instead of where it wants to drag me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And right now we're in a cycle of Virgo and Pisces eclipses. And so that is also part of what you may be feeling these days,
Yeah.
because that's the Virgo part of it is going to want us to be really practical and service oriented, and the Pisces part of it is going to want us to be dreamy and artistic and diffuse. And as depending on where those hit in your chart, it's going to be manifesting in different ways. But they'll be in that Virgo Pisces axis, I think, until early 2027. So
Oh, really?
it's a time to really be balancing your ideals with your pragmatism, I think.
Mhm.
Let me
Well,
clarify, what will be in the Virgo Pisces axis? All the eclipses?
The eclipses, typically once
Oh, yeah, usually
the
it should.
lunar nodes spend about 18 months in a particular pair of signs.
Oh,
All the eclipses, well, when they're first switching signs, the eclipses, like we had a Libra Aries eclipse
mhm.
spring, but now
Yeah,
we're switched into Pisces and Virgo eclipses.
interesting.
It's exactly what it feels like. Yeah. Like I say, feeling some of those bumps. Yeah, that because I think actually you're right. The eclipse was right at the almost the same time that Neptune transited back into Pisces. It's Neptune that went back, or was it Saturn that went back?
Saturn went back into Pisces, and it was
Yeah.
exactly opposite of the eclipse. So the eclipse happened at 29 Virgo, and Saturn is at 29 Pisces. So
Okay, that's what it was.
um, yeah, so it's really kind of, it created that tension of
Mhm.
putting structure around your spiritual practices versus how are you going to switch your how you serve. And because I always think of Virgo as the service sign.
Okay. Well, that is really helpful. Yeah. It's like, oh, that's exactly what that has been. So, but I have to say, I'm liking some of that left brain application or Virgo application to all the spiritual stuff because we have been writing content like an amazing level of information. I feel like is just downloading almost every day. Like it's almost sometimes a lot to track, but then getting it trackable is really helpful because of course we have always have the desire to help, like how can we help in these chaotic times? Like how can we help people use Reiki to manage it all these topics that we're talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, and even if you think about it in terms of planetary rulers, you've got all that content downloading through that your strong Pisces streaks, but Mercury rules Virgo, and so that's going to help you with the writing aspect and the communicating aspect.
Well, and I have Mercury in Pisces. So kind of all works together in those high degrees. So it's definitely felt some pretty big bumps. And really grateful to have Reiki to manage them.
Yes.
Yeah. Because the empathy right now, we've talked a lot about that, how deep the empathy is, the collective empathy is,
Yeah.
and collective stress, empathic stress.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, then the other thing you're doing is pottery. Tell us about that.
Well, I've been doing a lot of it lately because I sell my pottery at a local's farmer market, and I've been entering a lot of fairs and calls for artists, and I sell it on my website. And for me, um, pottery is just a beautiful way to, I guess, translate all that spiritual intuitive inspiration into something tangible and beautiful. And for me, I always try to make sure my pottery is infused with Reiki because I love the idea that somebody can interact with a mug or a bowl or something that I make on a day-to-day basis, and that it will be constantly bringing them good Reiki energy.
Oh, yeah, think about that. And in the home,
Mhm.
and some of it that you gave me, I've used as my Reiki grids. They're filled with crystals.
Yeah, I love making Reiki grids. And a lot of the pottery for me is it's changed since I've been here in southwestern Colorado because we have these dramatic sweeping views of the mountains and lots of trees and stuff around, and um I've been all of the things that strike me so much in the with the natural beauty of the world around me shows up in my pottery. I've been making bowls with the Cimarron Mountains on the outside, and I've been making a lot of sunflower themed items and aspen tree items, and it's been a fun way to pay homage to the gorgeous place we wound up living.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. I love that for you. And so right now you are in your yurt while you guys are building a house, and
Yep.
you have another outbuilding though that you're living in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we built an ADU first, and so I've got my pottery studio on the lower level, and then a little one-bedroom apartment over it. And our house will be hopefully finished in another 1 to 2 months, and then the yurt will become my full-time Reiki studio. I give sessions in the yurt, but I want to have it set up as a teaching space because um, much as I like doing teaching on Zoom, but I'm really looking forward to having a place to teach in person. And the yurt has just beautiful, beautiful energy.
Yeah, so tell us about that, like what offerings are if people want to find you in person, online, for all of the above. So,
Well, you can find me easily through my website, marthalacy.com. And it's kind of, I put the astrology, the Reiki, and the pottery all on that website. Although the amount of pottery on there is fairly limited. So if you see something on my Instagram, which is Pathfinder Ceramics, at Pathfinder Ceramics, or Pathfinder Pottery on Facebook, if people see stuff on that, they can always contact me through my email, martha@marthalacy.com. And I can, if it's not on my website, it doesn't mean it's not for sale. If I no longer have it, I can make it again for someone. And I've been shipping all over. People have been contacting me. It's been kind of fun that former patients and former patients' relatives have been finding my website and then buying my pottery, and I've been shipping it all over the country to to people.
that's great. And how about your astrology and your Reiki?
Those are, you can book sessions with me at marthalacy.com. And if you happen to be in southwestern Colorado, I would love to do those sessions in person, but I do both Reiki and astrology sessions over Zoom, and they work well over Zoom.
And so the astrology, what kind of sessions do you offer for that? I know you have beginning and then yearly.
Yeah, yeah. Right now, I've just broken it up into a natal reading or a follow-up reading. I've I'm almost done with my certificate in medical astrology, and so uh, I can do a fair amount of medical astrology reading. I can incorporate a fair amount of that into a natal or a follow-up reading. Um, And I really like astrology. What I really like, though, even more than the medical, is just seeing how astrology helps people gain an understanding of um, how the archetypes play out for their unique circumstances. Because um, it's I get done with a reading sometimes, and it's like a light goes off, and it's really gratifying when a light goes off and they say, "Oh, I always wondered why I did X, Y, or Z, or why I kept coming across it that way." And the readings help people understand that, and once they understand that, then they can pick how to work with those energies and choose how to, um, either get. I think of astrology as riding a wave, and you can learn to surf the wave if you know what's coming up, or you can get crashed into the shore. And it just gives them insight and clarity, and empowers people to pick how they want to express those things.
Yeah, I always think of it as the cycles that I'm in, and that there's a beginning, middle, and end of each cycle. And then how do I, again, use Reiki to access the higher frequencies of those?
Yeah.
So, like, okay, how do I get to the higher frequencies of Pluto moving or Uranus moving? Saturn and Neptune are a little bit easier, but those other two planets can be a really big bump.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just very um, helpful for someone to hear it's a cycle, because that
Yeah.
means they won't feel this way forever.
Yes.
There is an end to every cycle.
Yeah, and a new beginning of the next one.
Yeah.
Mhm. Well, Robin, anything else?
I think I think we are probably good to wrap up. All of Martha's information will be in the description. Like she said, marthalacy.com, she's got links to her social and everything else too. So such a nice and easy way to remember it. Um, but yeah, that'll also be in the description. So you can just click on it and find her at her website or her socials.
Well, I really appreciate you having me. This was fun.
Yeah,
Thank
is there
you.
anything else that we didn't talk about that you want to talk about?
Anything we didn't cover, we can put a pin in for some future date.
There you
There
go,
you go.
right?
Love it. Oh, that's good.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for listening, and till next time. All
Okay,
right.
thank you.
So we're ReikiLifestyle.com. Bye now.